Hey friends, welcome back to Crime Adjacent Season 8, the case of the Michigan Nightstalker. Here's where things stand. Tim Meeks was not the Nightstalker. That's what he told us. Sure, yes, he admitted to breaking into cabins to rub women's feet, but he was paid to. Someone put him up to it. No big deal if he was being honest. He was doing them a favor. They liked it. Gross, I know, but this is what happened, according to Meeks anyway. He was working the dock at the Bear River Country Club that summer, 2024, when a member cruised up in a 1960s Chris Craft wooden speedboat, Fancy. This guy gets out, sort of short, white comb-over hair, big, bushy black eyebrows, baggy eyes. Not to be rude, but if Tim Meeks thinks you're weird-looking... Anyway, they got to talking, and soon enough, Meeks steered the conversation to feet. Of course he did. Honestly, this is why the rest of what he told us sounded so believable. Dude couldn't help himself. He loved feet. There was no hiding it. And it turns out, so did this member with the fancy boat and the big bushy eyebrows. They bonded over women's feet. Movies, magazines, online feet forums, other club members, the whole works. So Meek says after a few weeks of chatting, this member said, "Hey, I have an idea. Why don't you break into cabins, really lean into it, this foot fetish? In fact, I'll pay you," this member said, let me live vicariously through you. Wear a mask, offer foot rubs, take their shoes, whatever you want. Just keep it between us, obviously. And I guess it sounded like a good enough idea, so Meeks agreed. He swore up and down that morning during Press's makeshift interrogation in my cabin that he only rubbed feet, that he only took shoes, that he didn't really want to scare anyone, but this guy, this member, paid him to. It was the member, Meeks insisted, who was behind any murders. Meeks would never hurt anyone, are you kidding me? It was this other guy. Press had heard stories just like this over the years, no doubt. Someone else put me up to it. But the thing is, the more Meeks talked, the more it made sense. The money, the access and knowledge of single visitors on the lake, it added up. And so Press and I headed over to this other guy's house. But what we found was the last thing anyone ever expected. Here's the story. But first, as soon as this season wraps up, Crime Adjacent is hitting the road for a series of live shows, so stay tuned. Nikki and I will be in Memphis, Austin, all the Portlands, the East Coast, the West Coast, all over, and we'll be talking about our favorite true crime cases at each stop. So stay tuned and follow along on the Patreon page at patreon.com/crimeadjacent for more. From San Francisco, this is Crime Adjacent, the never-ending true crime story told weekly. I'm Chase Patrick. I've always liked that quote from Stephen Jay Gould. I am somehow less interested in the weight and convolutions of Einstein's brain than in the near certainty that people of equal talent have lived and died in cotton fields and sweatshops. Hidden geniuses, going about their work quietly, thwarted by generationally entrenched inequalities of society. I'm reminded of this quote whenever I think of the most unheralded genius of our time, someone who slipped under the radar in public attention and acclaim, someone, I might add, who is intimately connected to this case, someone both you and I have met already, several times. It must be said, he would tell you himself, surely, that this guy masterminded some of the most intelligent plans in social engineering that I have ever seen, that anyone has ever seen. In fact, had we listened to this person, I think society would have solved all manner of social ills, war, conflict, gender and race disputes, infectious diseases, AI, government, you name it. True hidden genius stuff. For instance, in early 2020, when COVID was just beginning to make the leap across the Pacific Pond and weave its way into America, this guy put out a rather ingenious plan. with no training in medicine or studies on infectious diseases or really any skill set even remotely tangential to public health, this quiet savant put out a 10-point plan on Twitter that would solve quite literally everything. No vaccines, no masking, no social distancing, no deaths, no disruptions to everyday life or larger, broader social programs in the economy. Yes, the economy. That would be saved above all else. This is when I first learned of this quiet genius living amongst us. This plan. If only we had listened to him, we would surely be in a much better position. So, naturally, I wondered what else he had come up with, and it turned out quite a bit. Who knew? Back during the Me Too moment, when women were finally able to hold their abusers to account, at least socially, if not legally, this guy put out another 10-point plan on Twitter to get women together with their abusers to talk about it, to understand the differences between high-value men and women, and to grow together, to communicate, to avoid these, quote, misunderstandings that ruin lives. Finally, someone had tapped into the real problem. Women misunderstanding everything. We were saved. During the Black Lives Matter uprisings of 2020, he put out another 10-point plan on race relations in America and how everyone, yes, everyone, just needed to, quote, act better and, quote, follow the law. 400 years of entrenched racism? Solved. He had a plan for Ukraine, for elections, for AI, for every social quandary you can imagine. He had a 10-point plan, and if only we all listened to him, America could be saved. At some point, Twitter didn't provide enough space for his genius machinations, and so he turned to podcasting. I mean, who am I to judge? And he began hosting roundtable forums with other like-minded men. His guests and audience were like 9-to-1 men, who would at long last solve everything. Like I said, he didn't have any training in any of this. Not in history or psychology or public health, public relations, nothing. This guy lucked into being a roommate with someone else. Someone who would go on to found one company after another in Silicon Valley, and they would bring this guy along to be the head of human resources. After a few short years of that, the company went public and this guy suddenly became a millionaire, and then as time went on, a billionaire. And this, surely, became a sign of his genius. All you had to do was look at his bank account, that, he frequently said, was his credentials. It's pretty clear by now, I'm sure, that I don't like this guy. I've actually met him several times at big podcast award things, and he's just like his Twitter account, an insufferable know-it-all. Anyway, this guy, he retired from the company and started a podcast, got involved in government, God help us all, and then he started buying up homes. He said, I really want to see America, how everyone lives. It was difficult to miss, however, that these homes, designed to experience the true America, were located on fancy lake after fancy lake, from Wyoming to New York to Walloon. He bought up one cabin directly across from Claire's, and then bought up the cabins on each side of it for his staff and guests, creating a compound that would soon be emulated by other like-minded billionaires. I spoke to realtor Ebony Astor about that this weekend, and she said, that's basically when all the trouble began. These guys came in with their genius plans and they threw money at everything and expected people just to bend the rules for them. She paused, shaking her head. And Roger Michaels, he was the worst. We have met Roger Michaels before, outside of Claire's cabin and at the town meeting and a few other cabins. He railed against short-term rentals on the lake, saying they were disrupting the peace and quiet for the locals. Loud parties, drinking, music, noise, fire danger from all-night bonfires and s'mores parties. They had to be stopped to save the lake for the locals, like himself. It was a big argument going around town. Who belonged on the lake? Locals or tourists? Billionaires or those who had been on this lake for generations, like Ebony or Swanson? Ebony said, this guy comes in, buys up whatever he wants, like he's buying gumballs with pocket change, and drives up prices to the point that lifelong residents can no longer afford to live here. And then he goes on and on about being a local. And then his podcast and all his plans. People hated him. This would become important later. Because as soon as we left my cabin to head on over to Michael's cabin across the lake, we needed to hear what he had to say about Meeks' accusations. We noticed something odd. His cabin, quote-unquote, was a cabin in name only. It was huge, whereas all the other homes on the lake had porches and eaves and felt, well, like cabins, even the big ones. Michael's place was this poured concrete monstrosity, a real brutalist structure that gave the impression of a prison rather than a cozy lakefront cabin. It looked impenetrable, which is why it was so odd to see the big wooden front door hanging wide open. Sheriff Press inched closer and closer to the door, assuming Michaels would be on her within seconds, shouting about the Fourth Amendment and lawyers and whatnot. She saw cameras everywhere, covering everything. He had to know we were there by then. But the whole place was just quiet. Like that quiet that lets you know something is wrong. Press craned her neck around the door, keeping her body outside. She shouted, "Roger? Mr. Michaels?" Nothing. She leaned in even more. "Roger?" Nothing. She left the front door and walked around to the side of the house, which was all concrete just like the front. And then she moved to the rear, the side of the house facing the lake. And if every other angle of this architectural abomination was gray slab concrete, this side was nothing but glass, just floor-to-ceiling glass windows and shiny glass walls. I had to admit, I liked this part. The views from any part of the house were magnificent. But the views from outside were also interesting. Any passing boater or water skier could see everything inside. The kitchen, the living room, the bedrooms, the bathrooms. It was like living in a fishbowl. Which is why Sheriff Press, peering in through the glass walls, suddenly lifted her radio and called into dispatch. "Send an ambulance. The Michaels residence on Walloon. Now." Without a word, she pulled her gun and sprinted back to the front door. "This is Sheriff Morgan Press," she announced, shouldering open the wooden door. "I'm coming in." I didn't see what she did until we were already inside. I followed right behind her. And sprawled out on the kitchen floor, just like Allison Barnes and Petoskey, was the body of billionaire genius podcaster Roger Michaels. He was clearly dead, and had been for some time. And lying right next to him was the murder weapon. A rope, white and blue, just like all the others. But there was something else this time. A clown horn. Next time on Crime Adjacent. At long last, the hectic week on Walloon Lake was finally over. Meeks was captured. Michaels was dead. This was it, right? It was all over. If it really was these two guys breaking into cabins to either scare women or kill them, it would be all over by now, right? That's what Sheriff Press thought. Until the Nightstalker struck again that very afternoon. From San Francisco, this is Chase Patrick with a reminder. It's not crime, it's crime adjacent. I'll see you next week.